Welcome to Coffee with Democrats, a sensible platform for progressive conversations. Coffee with Democrats is a grassroots movement dedicated to hearing from Democrats, candidates, legislators, and friends from all political backgrounds who want great conversations. Coffee with Democrats is committed to increase Democrat voter registration and Democrat voter turnout by making voting more exciting and meaningful. And now here's your host of Coffee with Democrats, Kevin Dawson.
All right, excellent. I think I've got everything figured out now.
All right.
John, you can hear me just fine?
I can.
Excellent. Good morning, Monroe.
How are you?
Doing wonderful.
Hey.
Doing wonderful. I'll say this, and I mean every word of it when I say this. I'm doing a lot better now that I'm with both of you.
No,
Same.
fine.
So we've got John Holcomb, who's joining us down here from Coffee with Democrats. He's an attorney up in Pawhuska. And I'll just say off the top of my head, I just heard the news this morning. They're trying to locate a Pawhuska person who was killed by BTK up in Wichita. So they're exhuming some places up there. So that Pawhuska got in the national news today.
Oh, that's a wonderful way to do it.
No, that's not definitely not the way you want to do that. So
it wasn't me that got killed. So I'm really good.
Good to know that.
That's
and Kevin, you called me John. Of course, you know who I am. So I'm Steve.
Steve Holcomb.
So Monroe knows that. Yeah.
I think John Holcomb was a newscaster here.
Yeah.
Also.
I think that's right.
We're not
Yeah.
kidding. We're not kidding. And he's a nice guy, but we're not related. So yeah, very distantly, I'm sure.
So we're getting started a little bit early today. Well, we're right on time, actually. So we only got about 30 minutes. We're not going to do our normal routine of, going through and having coffee and stuff like that. We're just going to get down to basics. John, you've got to leave. You've got a hard quit at 10:30. We need to be able to get off of here and let you go for that. So
Thank you.
We're kind of get into the issues here real fast. Tulsa got into news media real fast this week because of an attack by Oklahoma Superintendent of Public Instruction, Ryan Walters. Ryan Walters attacked the Tulsa school district. He attacked what I consider to be a personal attack against the superintendent of Tulsa schools, Deborah Gist. Deborah Gist is, when you look at her biography, she's just an outstanding individual, has highest credentials. She was the commissioner for Rhode Island for a while. She is Harvard trained. She's got a doctorate in education from Pennsylvania University. So she's got all the credentials you could ever ask for an educator to be in her position. And John is an educator yourself.
I am.
Somebody who has worked, I'm assuming you've worked alongside Dr. Gist. This has been something that has been heavy on my mind that I wanted to be able to convey to everybody that listens to this and get some background from you about what you have seen transpire in the last week or so. And how devastating this could possibly be right now for the public schools, for Tulsa public schools.
Yeah, I'm here in Tulsa, but I'm hearing from folks who are in Oklahoma City attending the State Department of Education meeting, whereby if you showed up 90 minutes ahead of time, it was still too late to sign up for public comment. No doubt they've stacked the room with supporters and disruptors of public education. The agenda doesn't look promising, and it's possible that they could pull the accreditation of Tulsa Public Schools, the state's largest school district with 34,000 students. I heard from my son, who's a freshman at Booker T. Washington High School, go Hornets, where the students just staged a walkout and organized speakers to talk on the subject. It demonstrates the concerns rippling through the community and the potential for devastation. In theory, Superintendent Walters could shut down Tulsa Public Schools today. and that would be devastating for all the kids in our public schools. I was at the school board meeting last night with my good friend Monroe over here, and you could see the room packed with supporters of Tulsa Public Schools calling for local control. And they gave a standing ovation to our district superintendent, Deborah Gist, who unfortunately, sadly, announced her resignation last night. This is the beginning of a long struggle, and we're already seeing the effects. One of the most disturbing effects so far has been bomb threats leveled against a school, not even a Tulsa public school, a Union public school, after the state superintendent, Ryan Walters, recirculated a doctored video which purported to show that a Union public school educator was engaging in the woke agenda. So this is a bad thing, and it will end badly with threats of violence, and God help us, I hope not, but maybe even actual violence against our dedicated educators. And it will all be the responsibility of the state superintendent, whose dangerous and fiery rhetoric is creating conditions of chaos and even physical danger for Oklahoma educators. That's just not our way, and it's got to stop.
Well, and I think that the one thing that you were the direction you were going to go was he's actually endangering children's lives through these bomb threats. And
one of the threats issued was we will bomb every school in Union to get the woke agenda out. That's a threat that was made in Union public schools. And, anybody who lived through the Oklahoma City bombing will know that that kind of spirit has to be stopped.
Exactly. Monroe, I'm going to pivot over to you for a little bit and let you have some time here, because I want you to be able to explain from what you're hearing and some of the things that cause concern for you.
Yeah, well, I think John laid it out really, really well. And the one thing that I'll add to what you all were just talking about is, don't forget, I was in the meeting room when Ryan Walters called the Oklahoma Education Association a terrorist organization, introducing that type of language into what should be a conversation about student outcomes, which it's never been a conversation about that. And that's another real tragedy. And so we go from that to now we have folks threatening to bomb schools in our community. And so there's a couple things that we learned there, right? It's not about Tulsa Public Schools, right? Because as John correctly pointed out, these are union schools that now these folks are threatening to bomb. It really is just an assault on things that don't fit within one man's worldview. And he has radicalized folks to go down that road with him. And that's a very dangerous thing. And I don't think we should ever, we shouldn't let that go, right? We've learned now that when you allow those things to fester, they get really dangerous, they get really awful. And that's the road that we're going down right now. And I hate it for every kid in Tulsa. And I certainly hate it for our community overall. You mentioned the Deborah Gist and her credentials and all those things. Look, I mean, there's not any of us on this call that doesn't recognize the challenges that kids face across our state in public education. And so there's 2 points I want to make. One, I think as recently as 2008 or 2010, we were 26th in the country in education. We allow for funding to go down, down, and down until we hit the bottom of the barrel. And so there's a lot of there's a strong argument that educators across the state are punching above their weight. Why do I say that? The other point that I want to make, that if we just look at Tulsa according to our own equality indicators, kids, that the same kids who are struggling in school are the kids whose eviction rates are double that than in other places. They're the same kids who struggle from food insecurity and all these social determinants of things that show up in school every day. And because Oklahoma has failed to invest in these things, we failed to take care of people in our communities, those things just show up in school. And so to say that it is the fault of one individual superintendent or it is the fault of any sort of woke agenda, it's a dollars and cents issue. And it's a dollars and cents issue that we've allowed to fail. And so now the folks who were part of wrecking the train, now want to set everything on fire, and we cannot allow that to happen. That's exactly what's happening. This example in Tulsa Public Schools is just that. It's just an example of it.
Well, that's we've got marginalized children all over the United States, all over Oklahoma, and these are children who live within poor communities. They live in poverty. We've got a lot of real bad statistics coming out of Oklahoma. We're ranked 49th in funding for our public education. And that's not the fault of the teachers. That's not the fault of the educators, and it's not the fault of the students. The direct line that we have to pay attention to, and of course, both of you work within the legislature, but it's your colleagues on the other side of the aisle that are the people that are driving this effort. And so, I mean, I'm going to put a plug in for Democrats that we've got to try to do everything we can to elect as many Democrats as possible in this state, which we understand is a conservative state, but we've got to do what we can because the supermajority that we have is driving this directly into the ground. So
not only are they driving to the ground, they've been silent on this issue.
Exactly.
Schools have been threatened to be bombed. Teachers have been attacked. A threat of a takeover from everybody that here. John, how many of our colleagues talk about local control all the time? They've all
the time.
So when it comes
when
down
it's about their local.
Yeah, they nobody said a word. Kids are being threatened. Nobody's saying a word. And so
the law and order part.
Right.
Yeah, I mean the other underlying thing of this is it is one of the most staggering failures of leadership at its most basic level that we've ever seen.
Right.
Yeah, amen.
It's we've got about a little less than 20 minutes left. I really want to give people an opportunity who listen to this some hope on what we can do. As a pragmatist and looking at the pragmatic situation that we're in Oklahoma, we're looking at a period of about another 3.5 years before we have another election so that we can elect another superintendent. So that's 3.5 years that we're going to have to deal with Ryan Walters. As a pragmatist, that's what we're looking at. But in order to put him under, put a fence around him, there are some things that we can do. And first and foremost, I think every single person who has any concern about our public education, we've got to start working on some specific action plans on how to put a fence around him and help pull him back into what his main priority and his main job is. And that's to be the superintendent of public education, not some board member on some mom's website. It's about dealing with getting the funding necessary for our students and for our children, because the right now that's the biggest obstacle that we're running into is his continued failure to get all of the funding that's necessary for our schools. It's continued failure by just this whatever he uses woke for. I hear woke and I hear racist dog whistles. That's all it's used for. And it's supposed to continue to marginalize people and push people down and make some very few people feel very good about what he's saying. And again, I digress, but let's talk a little bit about what you guys think are specific action plans on how to help rope him in and fence him in so that he can, we can use the legislative process, we can use the Republicans and start pulling those activities together. And we can actually have a coalition of people throughout the state that start working on these action plans. So I'll start with Monroe.
Okay. Go ahead, John. John, you go ahead. Go ahead and jump in, John.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, I have a novel suggestion, which is that we alter the Constitution to allow the impeachment of public officials by secret ballot in the legislature. Because if we did it by secret ballot, the Republicans in the House and the Senate, I'm confident, would impeach this. Unfortunately, they have to do it out in the open. And until they grow a spine and are willing to recognize that that is the only way to deal with this person, then we're going to have to wait for Ryan Walters to break the system a little more and a little more until it affects them in their localities. We're going to have to impeach this man sooner or later. He has no respect for law and order. He's not doing his job. He's already demonstrated malfeasance, negligence, and misconduct. And it's only going to get worse. And if you talk to our colleagues across the aisle in private, they will acknowledge that. they've got to be strong enough to do that in public and actually rein this man in. And I'm not confident right now. I'm afraid we're going to have to feel a lot more pain before the supermajority is ready to hold him accountable.
So something that's very similar to this situation, what happened down in Texas with the attorney general down there, it took 8 years of investigations and 8 years of Republicans in this, like you said, tearing down the attorney general's office in Texas before they finally pulled him into an impeachment process. But now that whole process is tainted by one man who is the lieutenant governor. So, I mean, even here in Oklahoma, if everybody grows a spine and does exactly what you said, we still have that process to follow, and it could wind up to our lieutenant governor here in the state of Oklahoma, who would be the president of that proceeding. So we've got to be very, very cautious.
One of the things that I've pointed out a couple different times, what changed in Texas was Paxton had a wrongful termination suit that he asked the legislature to give him $3 million for, and they were kind of like, "Hey, when you were out doing this out all over the state, we looked the other way, but you start to cost us money." That's when we're like, "Okay, you got to go." And so, I know there's been issues of folks being dismissed from the State Department of Education, so there might be some wrongful termination there. If the superintendent and the board votes to strip TPS of its accreditation today, I imagine there's going to be some legal proceedings filed there. Let's not forget that this man is being looked into by the FBI and the AG's office in Oklahoma. Ryan Walters is doing so much of this because of all the heat that he's under in other areas, right? And I think some of that is turning to me. I think in the legislature, in addition to what John said, I mean, I think we also need to really have a real conversation about just narrowing the scope of the state superintendent. Now that we know that for the first time, it won't be the last time. Now he's set a precedent for it. Now we know this may be used for somebody who's an ideologue, not somebody who came to make sure that schools have what they need, to make sure that kids have what they need, that we're continuing to do as best we can, progressing with teacher pay and stuff like that. That's not what he's interested in. I think we have to embrace the fact that he doesn't know how to be a state superintendent. I mean, this isn't just somebody who is just an ideologue. He's an ideologue who actually doesn't know how to do the job. And he's proven that. He's proven that with dollars that have been misappropriated and spent different ways. He's proven that with his inability to even maintain, be a good steward of the department itself. John, I don't know how many people have walked out of the department, but I know it's been pretty significant. The threats that he's given and leveled to his employees, and this fight with the biggest district in the state, which doesn't help the state at all. I'll tell you, back when Janet Barisi was superintendent, the Tulsa Chamber did an analysis of all the bad press that Oklahoma was getting just from the state superintendency. It was $43 million in a negative ad for Oklahoma when Janet Barisi was state superintendent. They were able to, because we're in the New York Times, we're in the Washington Post, we're going to see it in all this stuff. I guarantee you, we have reached that number already with Ryan Walters. And what does that say for us in the rest of the world? You can go to Paris if you want to and try to get companies to move here to the Paris Air Show, but they're looking at your state superintendent every day saying how horrible schools are in Oklahoma, telling people they shouldn't go to OU and OSU, right? Like I don't know if you all remember that, right? He said, I don't know why anybody's a kid there. Are you kidding me? I mean, this is the guy who's there. And the last thing I'll say about that is, Ryan Walters, if we are to accept the premise that outcomes are so bad that we need a change in leadership, do not forget, when you take the time from when he started as Secretary of Education to now, he's been at the helm of public education in Oklahoma for 3 years. You tell me in those 3 years, if we were to accept his premise, have things got better or worse? So if there's anybody who should carry a large share of the blame, it's the guy with no real credentials, who's an ideologue who doesn't know how to do the job, and that man is Ryan Walters.
I'm glad you said that, because just going back to what I said about Dr. Gist, she's the most highly qualified person that I think we've got in almost any state education system in the state of Oklahoma, and we've allowed somebody that has no credentials whatsoever to actually run her out. And from that, I'm making some notes here and kind of paraphrasing what I'm hearing you guys saying is we do have to have a legislative process. We have to have a plan in place. And I think that you guys are in a lot better situation than those of us who are out here that are not part of the legislature to be able to pursue those efforts. And I think that, and I want to thank you guys for your service and for your hard work as legislators and having to deal with the super red majority. The other thing that I'm kind of paraphrasing what I'm hearing here as well is do not resign, do not surrender, do not allow this man to run you out of your job. Make him fire you. Make him be the person that is going to actually drive you out of the job, because if he does that, then he opens himself up in the state to a wrongful termination lawsuit. By you resigning, you give up those rights.
Yeah. The other thing, John, I'll say one thing and I'll let you, I know we're getting close. I guess we got 10 minutes. I won't, this won't be a 10 minute comment here, but there is a couple things that I do want to just say to Democrats who are listening. And I know elections might be a year off and all that type of stuff. But there's some data that showed that there's a lot of people who think that their vote doesn't matter and that like they have no power. And I know as Democrats in Oklahoma, we can feel that way at some time. That is not true. If Democrats show up and vote, we can swing elections every single year. And we have to, it can't just be when somebody's running for governor. John talked about the courage of legislators. If Democrats show up, we can change legislative seats, right? Like we can actually do that.
Yep.
That's a doable thing, but people have to understand, don't think about the margins in the last governor's race. Look at the numbers in your state house race. And if every Democrat showed up, Democrats can win in places that we probably traditionally people would not think that we would win. And my plug about that is the pragmatic nature of the Democratic voter. I was elected in 2016. What happened in 2017, 2018? Budget failures, teacher walkout. What did Democrats, at least in Tulsa County, do? They sent us John Waldron. They sent us Melissa Provenzano. They sent us teachers to the legislature. They say that's what we need up there. What did Stillwater do? They sent us Trish Ranson. Cycle. What did they do? They sent us Joanna Dossett on top of JJ Dossett even before that, because that was when it came to the fact that tribal sovereignty was on the line. They sent us Amanda Swope, who is a nation citizen. When the question of, are we going to follow the laws of the state? They sent us Suzanne Schreiber, who's an attorney. Democrats look at what the state needs, and we respond every single time. So this is not just about partisanship. This is about pragmatism. So we have somebody in the state superintendency right now, as we said, who's completely unqualified to do that job. What we do all the time and time again, is we send people to office who know what the heck they're doing and who can meet the moment. We've done it over and over again in Tulsa. We've done it across the state. And so Democrats in every part of the state need to understand that if it's going to get better, it's going to take you. This is bottom line. Bottom line. There's some courage that you get from being in the minority all the time. You take unpopular positions all the time. So it's a great moment for Democrats, all those who are listening, to say, hey, if this state's going to get better, we just have to decide it's going to get better. That's it. We can't wait on somebody else to do it. We have to decide it's going to get better. You give Democrats, 25, 27, oh my God, 34 seats in the House. You don't need the majority. At that point, you make sure that things happen. You can't hold people accountable. And so everybody that's listening, I would love to win a governor's race. I want us to. One day we will. But if we go next cycle and you can get us anywhere close to 34 seats in the House, you change the makeup of the state and how the policy runs.
Yep.
So just want to say that.
I appreciate
Amen
that.
and preach.
Absolutely outstanding commentary from you, and we really appreciate you saying that, Monroe. Steve, you've got a question here.
Good question. Can everybody hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Have you all thought about being in the positions that you're in to ask the Attorney General directly for an opinion about whether Ryan Walters is exceeding the scope of his responsibilities, falling down on his responsibilities, violating Oklahoma's Constitution to provide, free public education with certain standards? Any thoughts along those lines? Any discussions?
I filed my first request with the AG last spring when the superintendent ran a video demeaning and endangering educators on the state website. It looked like a campaign video that used public resources. So, I imagine the AG is getting an email a week on, can we impeach him for this? Can we impeach him for that? Because he breaks the law every week.
Yeah. And additionally, I am the chair of the Oklahoma Legislative Black Caucus this term. And if the state board votes to strip TPS of its accreditation today, we have discussed as a Black Caucus that we're going to file a request for an inquiry from the U.S. Department of Education Civil Rights Division to see if the actions that Ryan Walters has taken for the rationale that he's taken it for violates the civil rights of kids in Tulsa to a appropriate public education. So we will be doing, and we'll be watching closely what happens today. If that happens, we will not only be doing that here in Oklahoma, but asking the federal government to step in and take a look at that.
So yesterday there was a letter that was put out by Chief Chuck Hoskins from the Cherokee tribe. He put out an extensive letter kind of mirroring what you just said, Monroe, about how they were supporting. And I'm curious if there's any ability in order to have the Black Caucus as well as the Native Americans join together in order to pursue that.
Absolutely. I mean, look, what we know is we got to have a whole coalition to get this stuff done, right?
Yeah, sure.
John, the letter that John's talking about right now was not even the first step, but I thought a very aggressive and appropriate step at the time. You have to do that because part of that, when it comes down to it, somebody's looking at this, all that stuff matters because you don't know who's going to look in and say, oh, well, hey, he was warned here and this happened here and then this happened here and then this happened here. There's an incredible pattern of practice of somebody who completely is not even thinking about or respecting the different levels of government right now, or any respect for law or process. And I think the tribal governments and us and other folks, I mean, even Republicans, my goodness, maybe one day, but it has to be a coalition. And we've known that about everything that's ever happened. I mean, you go back to the civil rights movement. It wasn't just Black people, marching in the streets. It was a coalition of folks.
Exactly. Right.
That the world had to change. Yep. And this is the same thing. And so you have to battle back what is pretty much homogenous bad. So everybody, largely the people who are on the other side of this, look the same, think the same, with diversity and folks who say, not here, not now, not ever. And that coalition is a coalition we have to lean into making sure we're forming. And I think that's what we're doing right now.
I'd like to one other point, and that is that, and we see this nationally with the Trump investigations, that Ryan Walters has free reign with a megaphone to go woke, woke, woke this, woke, woke, woke that. If there's some way to get him under sworn testimony where he's questioned about what the hell he means, he's not going to be able to respond in a manner that's going to be flattering to all of him, and it's going to be on the record. Now, I don't know how that might happen, but it's just something to keep in the back of everyone's minds about how that might happen.
And I want to throw in one closing point for those who think the elections of 24 are too far away. There are some good nonpartisan school board races you can get involved in. Some of them are only 8 months away. And I would say school board races are a real imperative for Democrats and all responsible voters. We can't let the crazies take over our school boards and disrupt them. The fires that in Tulsa are spreading to Union public schools, and they're going to keep on spreading around the state. Doesn't matter how red a district is, they're not going to be protected from Moms for Liberty coming in and saying that there's a woke agenda in their public schools. So get involved in city council elections, get involved in school board elections, and one more nonpartisan election you might get involved in, Monroe Nichols for mayor of Tulsa.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that because we were getting ready to.
I am too.
We're going to pivot to that here in just a little bit because, we're going to run out of time here with you, John, but we still need to give Monroe a really good platform to be able to talk. But before you go, John, I just, again, speaking on your coalition of people that we need to have working within the state, we need to have that coalition flood the representatives, whether they be Republicans in the Senate or the House, flood them in their offices and go in and to have a one-on-one conversation with them, let them know just exactly how disappointed they are in what is going on with this person. And again, it's not above me as just a citizen of the state of Oklahoma to have a conversation with the Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma as well, and have that conversation with his office and staff. So, John, we got one more minute. You have anything else you want to say before you have to go?
Everybody watched closely today what the outcome of today's State Board of Education meeting, where instead of talking about the needs of kids, they're going to talk about gender pronouns. They're going to talk about Chinese infiltration of our schools, and they're going to talk about breaking up the state's largest school district. It's a travesty. It's a sad state of affairs for a state that has public education grounded into its constitution from the beginning. This is a mandate the founders of the state wanted. The current occupant of the state superintendency is violating our deepest roots and traditions. So everybody pay attention and get ready to hit back. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, John. We appreciate you coming on, and we'll get you back on here again real soon. We'll start working on your additional platforms and things that you want to talk about besides education at some point. But thank you for taking the time out of your day to be with us here on Coffee with Democrats.
Always good to have coffee with Democrats. Y'all take care.
Take care. Thank you. All right, let's pivot just a little bit and give Monroe a little bit of time to talk about becoming the next mayor for the great city of Tulsa.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about it. This is this is a marathon of a race. Election day is not until August of 2024, so we got a long way to go. But in that amount of time, like, our goal is to really not only campaign in every part of the city, but really engage with every part of the city in a different way. Right. The one thing that's great about running a race over the course of 12 months is that you don't have to do these flybys, vote for me, and run off to the next thing. Right. You can spend some time in community. So really excited about that. Have really talked about really three issues to this point that are important as we kind of think about this as a whole. This is a city about 420,000 folks, and really leaned in on issues around public safety, affordable housing, and really thinking about how we're going to not just address but eradicate homelessness in this community. A lot of people don't think that's possible. You say that and they're like, oh, I don't know about that, but we feel very confident that that's well within our ability to do, and really focus on job creation, equitable growth across this community. Tulsa's had a lot of great progress, but not everybody's been a great beneficiary of that progress, and that's one of the things that we want to work on.
Right. Well, you heard what I talked about with Dr. Gist so much about her credentials and how she is so overly qualified for the position that she's holding. I mean, she went from being the commissioner of the state of Rhode Island to being the superintendent at Tulsa. And you are another person that's got very good qualifications and credentials. And I want to give you some time. Would you please tell us a little bit about your biography, about your education? Because, when anybody who's running for the mayor of a big community like the city of Tulsa, you got to have lots of qualifications, and you've got those. So talk to us about that, if you would.
Sure, would love to. So, I went to the University of Tulsa. I was a student athlete there, had a political science and economics degree from TU. My first job out of college was actually in the mayor's office for Mayor Kathy Taylor. And at that point in my career, Kathy gives me this binder, and my scope of work was around really trying to cut back down on juvenile violence. And what I began to find is like, hey, here are all these other issues that are feeding into that, right? So what do we do at that time? I mean, I created 18 new after school programs because we found that juvenile violence was most prominently committed between 3 and 6. So let's give young people on the prevention side something to do. We partnered with the Office of Juvenile Affairs to work with kids who had already been in the court system to help intervene with them, to put them on a different path, and actually set up on the other end really the first workforce reentry program of its kind here in Tulsa. So we worked with the State Department of Career Tech actually to have folks who were coming out of the system. They would get transferred to Taft, Oklahoma. They get job training. We worked with companies here in the Tulsa area. They went to work. And so really from the very start, started thinking about these issues at more of a systemic issue, what's the systemic problem driving this? I did a lot of other really fun and wonderful things in the mayor's office I'm really proud of, but left the mayor's office, worked at OU Tulsa. At the time we were starting what was called the School of Community Medicine, trying to make sure that the data that we saw that showed that Tulsans in North Tulsa lived 14 years less than Tulsans who lived just 5 miles south of them. So worked on that at OU Tulsa. Left there to work at the State Department of Education and the Tulsa Chamber on economic development, doing business retention and expansion programming, and then started a nonprofit that was all about, because at that point in my career, I had found that whether I was in the mayor's office looking at juvenile justice, or I was working with companies on how they can expand their business, the problems were all so much the same. So the question was, how can we all come together to get better outcomes across the board? And that was born Impact Tulsa, which is still a nonprofit here in this community today. Is think about how do we bring together all these sectors to improve outcomes in life in Tulsa. And then I got elected to the state legislature, where I've spent the last 7 years working on issues that span from education to affordable housing to right sizing our state's income tax structure. Right now, if you're a janitor at, Tulsa Public Schools, for example, since we've been talking about TPS, you pay the same percentage of your income in state taxes that the starting guard for the Thunder pays, right? And that's just something that has to change in Oklahoma. I was actually, before we had the budget failures, the person who tried to run a bill to lower the threshold for raising taxes in this state, raising revenue in this state, before it was cool and everybody wanted to do it. So I spent my career really taking that same attitude of what is the systemic problem going on here and how do we fix that? And I look forward to doing that in the mayor's office as well.
Well, and something that I see on your resume that I really appreciate, and I wore this shirt today just specifically for you, was you've got a master's degree in public administration from the University of Oklahoma. So
yeah, I say I got the best of both worlds. I got a TU education and an OU degree.
Yeah. So as a fellow grad of OU, I wanted to be sure and share that. Steve's over there. He's having a fit, but
Steve. Monroe, really excited about your candidacy, and I heard about it, and great to hear you verbalizing what you stand for.
Yep.
I was looking at your Ballotpedia page. I see that you've sponsored some criminal procedure bill.
Yep.
Regarding arrest and appearances for magistrates, etc. I'm a former assistant DA from a long time ago in Oklahoma, ran for district attorney in the Stillwater area a little over 20 years ago. I'm in Osage County. There's jurisdiction exercised in North Tulsa when it comes to the district attorney's office up here. So there's a lot of activity that is in Osage County, fully an hour away from Tulsa, where there's prosecutions that go on that affect Tulsa. I wondered if you might talk about that, but I have one other thing you kind of roll into it, and that is the whole McGirt issue.
Yeah.
And these issues regarding sharing or jurisdictional issues regarding, Muskogee Creek versus Tulsa, yada, yada, yada. And how you think you might be addressing those questions here during the campaign? Because obviously those will come up.
Yeah, 100%. I spent some time talking to a lot of our tribal, not even neighbors, but, Tulsa's an interesting community. We have Osage, Creek, and Cherokee land. It's Tulsa. Essentially the city of Tulsa, with the Creek Nation being the largest share of it, of anybody. My thought on all things going is that if the city can be viewed and have the same relationship we have with the state as we have that same relationship with the tribes, that's the best possible outcome, at least on how we interact with the tribes. I think it's very easy to do. I talked with the Cherokee Nation not long ago, and I think at this point they have, and this is from the Hooper case, right? So I wanted to really get some deep knowledge on kind of what was going on there, what's been their pain points, what's been their conversation with the city. I think they've signed somewhere in the neighborhood of 24 or 25 different jurisdictional agreements as it relate to traffic tickets and stuff like that. Now there's a whole bunch of other things that are going to, come at us later, taxes and all this kind of stuff. But I think if we can get to a place where we have the same relationship with the tribes as a city that we have with the state, that's actually where you want to be, because we have the same kind of jurisdictional issues with the state right now, right? And we've been able to figure that out, all that stuff out in law. It's obviously been that way for a very, very long time, but that would be my preference, right? Like that's what we need to do. I think for us to have the same sort of contentious relationship that the governor has with the tribes doesn't benefit us at all. And honestly, I think it's incredibly disrespectful to folks who we have built a city on the land that they were not only promised, but they inhabited long before we got here. And so for me, I think it just boils down to that, right? I think if you go into it from the standpoint of really wanting to partner and get it right, it hopefully reduces the animosity that exists between the state and the tribes. Now we don't have to have that at the city, At the same time, I think there might be some real questions around, is every tribe able, then do they have the capacity, to take on these things? But the question is, how can us as a partner help them with that, right? So I think that's the big thing for me, is finding a pathway where we can hammer out these agreements that allow for us to operate no different than we do at the state every day of the week. I mean, Tulsa police, state troopers figure it out. Our municipal courts and the state courts figure it out. I don't think there's any reason why we can't do the same thing with the tribes.
Yeah, capacity is the operative word there, because it's just over the last 30, 40 years with casino dollars coming into the pockets of a number of the tribes. Osagers are one of them, Muskogee Creek another, that they are able to build that kind of system or capacity to handle these things that they couldn't handle before.
Right.
And so it's, in one sense, even though I've got a lot of opinions about gambling in general, but here it is. We have it, and we have it in spades here in Oklahoma. It's perhaps one of the more positive aspects of the casino dollars, that the tribes are able to lift themselves up by their own bootstraps and exercise sovereignty, and do so in a way that you're speaking to, where we can have these agreements between state and city and tribes that it's just seamless. It's what we've all done before anyway, between counties and states and cities. And now it's just we have the templates to make this work, and
don't have to overcomplicate.
Very interested in doing so.
I'll say too, the tribes also did a good job of diversifying their businesses, right? Like, they have a number of different businesses out. Exciting gaming still, probably the golden goose, but they've done a good job of diversifying, kind of their economic portfolio. I don't know, and I've talked this a little bit, at least with the Cherokees, and mentioned to a couple other folks. I don't know why it is we can't. I know the Cherokees were gonna, think about putting a courthouse in North Tulsa, and that was met with some criticism at the time from members of the community. But it's like, I don't know why, if it was necessary to have, the tribes have a footprint here, I don't know why we can't have a complex where folks can be charged very quickly and see a native judge if they have to, or whatever the case may be. There's no reason we can't all be in the same complex. I think that's I think this is the case with everything we do in government, no matter what level that you're in or anything like that. We've got to make things more efficient for people who need to be taken care of. And this issue with McGirt and everything else, look, hey, the law is interpreted how the law is interpreted it. Us continuing to fight around it is kind of goofy. We should be figuring out, how do we make sure that we all can live in safe communities, that folks who may have found themselves on the other side of the law for a traffic ticket or anything else, still have that issue taken care as efficiently as possible. And there's no reason we can't do it. We've been doing it for a long time with the state. The state's been doing it a long time with the federal government. It's disrespectful for us to think that we can't do it with tribes. And I just have a lot more respect for our tribal leaders and citizens in that.
So I want to go ahead and put in a plug for those people who are listening to please go to monroeformayor.com. There's a contribution page there, and please contribute to his campaign, because again, this is a day and age where you can't get there without having the funds and the fiscal backing. So please go to monroeformayor.com and give your support, because it's critical. We need to be able to do this and turn Tulsa around and keep Tulsa blue. And Monroe is going to be the person that's going to be capable of doing that. Also, if you have information that you just want to reach out and get info from the website, go to info@monroeformayor.com and get that, make your request for information. If there's something that you doubt about Monroe and his authenticity, give him a call, because it's going to be answered. So, Steve, I think you had additional things that you wanted to bring up.
Well, and just along the same line, and I really like how you're responding to this, and I really appreciate that. I think it's the right approach. It's the rational approach, and it's not this approach that we're seeing on Fox News or Newsmax or what have you. When Stitt gets up on Fox News, it's this anti-Cherokee, anti-Native attitude. When I've been asked questions up here in Pawhuska on occasion about McGirt, I can tell the premise of the question is coming from someone who's heard that the Native Americans want to take over Oklahoma. And I don't tell them to their face that that's ridiculous. I just say, look, this is something will get worked out. We have this history of doing so with these pacts between different jurisdictions. It's just another jurisdictional issue is what it is. It's not that big of a deal, and it should be looked at positively. No, Oklahoma is not going, the lands are not going to be turned back and reverted back to that. I mean, if that was ever a possibility, that water is way under the bridge.
Yeah.
So it's just that fear factor being used to inflame votes or attitudes. And of course,
well, I mean, I think it's also from the standpoint of the governor. I mean, there's no love lost there. But what boils down to what he probably had in his previous life, a business dispute. That's probably how he sees this. And I know he talks about being a Cherokee Nation citizen, but the dog whistle of it is, again, like it's like saying, oh, these greedy Indians want to take over the state of Oklahoma, which is also the dumbest line that you would ever, because I mean, there's been no greater partner in this state with the state than the tribes. And I mentioned, like, gaming is the golden goose for a lot of them, but they have diversified their economic portfolios. Their economic impact of the state is we would not get the same level of economic activity to move to Oklahoma. There's tribes here all the time. They are headquarter industries that aren't going anywhere. And they're building hospitals. They're taking care of schools. They're building roads. They're investing in infrastructure. They're doing all these things, right? And they're not doing them, putting taking out an ad in the Tulsa World or the Oklahoma to say, look at the great things we're doing. They're just taking care of people. Right. And I think, we ought to give this. You think about this. If somebody came to your house, decided that they were going to, take your backyard, they're going to take your kitchen, they're going to take all your guest rooms, but you can have your master bedroom and you can come to the kitchen every once in a while. You're going to fly their flag over the house and be happy about it? No, you're not. The tribes in the state have endured, this idea of, we talk about takeovers in education. They've endured that, and they've continued to be great partners. They've taken care of their tribal citizens. They've taken care of other Oklahomans. They deserve far more respect and reverence than we've given them. And the fact of the matter is, they're a greater partner to the state of Oklahoma than the state of Oklahoma has ever been to them. And for that, we ought to approach every conversation we have moving forward with a certain level of respect and reverence, because we owe them a lot, and they don't really owe us anything.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for saying that. That was that was very profound, the way that came across. So we're going to kind of wind this down a little bit. I know we've kept you on here a little bit longer, but I want to give the people that are going to be following you a little bit more information about. You touched on some policy and things that you really have in mind, but I'd like to get a little bit more in depth in some of the other things that you want to get involved in. Some of the other, not just policy, but some initiatives that you'd like to be able to throw out there into the city of Tulsa that to help revitalize. And revitalize is kind of a heavily used word because Tulsa is a vibrant city. It doesn't need to be revitalized. It's such a vibrant city. It continues to grow and it keeps getting better. But there are areas that get left behind that need that revitalization. And so, I mean, if you're not growing as a community, you become stagnant, and stagnation means you're dying.
Yeah, one of the most interesting things being a state representative is my legislative district has to be one of the most economically and racially diverse districts in the state, right? I have parts of Owasso, and I used to have parts of Sperry. So I had some rural parts of the state, some kind of suburban parts of this community, going into North Tulsa, which is, largely African-American and also kind of blue collar white folks. Was really interesting there. Hispanic Tulsans in the Kendall Whittier area and all throughout downtown out to West Tulsa. And what you find over that time is you got neighborhoods with golf courses, you got people living in high-rise condos, but you do also have people living in neighborhoods where the house next to them is completely blighted. And
Right.
if you think about, we mostly hold our wealth. The average Joe holds his wealth in his home or her home, and the impact to your home value with something like that sitting next to you is not great. And then you think about a community where a lot of folks have not even been able to own a home. So, really, you talk about revitalizing the community. I'm thinking about the neighborhoods where I would knock doors and could not believe that somebody was living in the house next to the one I was next to, or the old lady whose husband's passed away and she has her nice house, keeping her yard really well, but next to her is a house that's an absolute danger to catch on fire or be a place where maybe some nefarious things are going on. We have to get serious about blight mitigation and putting folks into homes who are currently unable to do so. And we can do that. One of the things we're talking a lot about right now is to get through some of the red tape, because the problem is developers are never going to see the value in revitalizing older parts of town unless they're going to put it with $500,000-$600,000 houses, which is going to completely ruin the character of that community. But what we could do is we could speed up the process of turning these properties over to developers, putting liens on them, say build them to these specs, we'll remove the lien, but they have to be income affordable for folks who are of this community. And so we really feel, and I really believe that we can revitalize parts of this community and keep the character of the community intact. So we can solve for gentrification at the same time, making sure that we're making communities look nice, which I think is going to really impact not just, what things look like, but it's going to impact the quality of schools and everything else in between. Real sense of community pride. So one thing that I know if I get elected, my administration is going to be really focused on is changing the face of neighborhoods and communities that we've forgotten about over the last several years. And that's something I'm actually probably most excited about, just because I know the residual impact of that kind of activity in a community changes everything. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, we really appreciate you having that vision and that that ability to have that plan in place ahead of time and not reacting later on during a campaign. You're very forward thinking. So that's something that I greatly appreciate. So I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping this down, and because we're going to try to keep this down less than an hour.
Sure.
So again, thank you for coming on Coffee with Democrats. We really appreciate you. The times that I've spent with you in person, you're a giant of a man. You're just a big guy that let's just put it this way. We're both big guys, and I feel small compared to you. So I appreciate that. And it's good to be around other adults. So thank you so much. Appreciate you being on here and having Coffee with Democrats today. And, the other topic that we the mayor's job that you're running for, the campaign that you have, we can't just let that just overshadow the other purpose of what we had Coffee with Democrats today. And that is, let's tell people to get out and go to their local legislator, and not just go to any local, go to the Republican. Don't just concentrate on within your own political circle. Get outside that bubble. Right. And start talking to other people that are across the aisle and let them know how unhappy you are about the situation that's going on with Ryan Walters. This guy's a train wreck, and he's going to just drag this state down. He's going to drag down our economy. He's going to increase our tax base. Everything's going to start suffering because of what he's doing within the education world. So
I'll say this. I'll just say this, and I tell this to Republicans all the time, and I would encourage anybody, even Republicans, talking amongst themselves, Democrats talking to Republicans. No problem. I mean, I have most of my friends are Republicans. I work with so many of them every day. But my message to them all the time is, it doesn't have to be this way.
Exactly.
It don't got to be this way. You don't have to be this to be Republican.
Right.
It doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's family members and friends that are Republicans, and I've lost a lot who became MAGA. And for those family members and friends, I hope that MAGA dies so that we can start having a relationship again. So anyway, that doesn't mean that they should stop being Republicans. It just means that let's start having a relationship with one another. and being able to talk about policies and procedures and having that good disagreement. But we also, in this time of day, this time in this situation, we may have to have some good trouble. And we may have to encourage some people to go out and have good trouble, including ourselves, because it's going to have to be that type of situation in order to raise the awareness needed to get through here. So again, thank you so much. I mean, you've been just a wealth of information. You're a great candidate. You've done a great interview with us today. Nothing but positive feedback from us for you and your future. And we wish you all the best, and we will be supporting you and doing everything we can to help you. And we also hope that you'll come back on here so that you can spend an entire hour with your campaign and with some other people within your campaign with us, and just having a complete hour talking and elevating your campaign on our platform.
Well, thank you so much for both of you, and I will absolutely be back. And I really appreciate you inviting me on this morning. Well,
I'll have to give credit. You got a message last night about 10 o'clock from me asking you to come on, and you jumped on it. So you're very accessible, and that's something that I greatly appreciate. Steve, you have something you want to say?
Well, again, go to monroeformayor.com. I did it while we were doing this and made a little contribution. So please, everybody,
thank you.
Get up there and start throwing your nickels and dimes in there at the very least.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thanks everybody so much for being on Coffee with Democrats today. Next week is going to be we're kind of shooting from the hip again for next week. We do have a couple of really good candidates there, or people that are going to be coming on Coffee with Democrats. Nikki Fried from Florida, the Democratic Committee chair for Florida, will be on here with us on September 7th. And we're really looking forward to that, because that's going to be another big campaign down in Florida. We got to try to do what we can to get rid of DeSantis and some of those the jokes that are going on down there. And we're really we're looking forward to that conversation on a national level. We're Colin Allred. You know, you played football. Colin Allred's a hell of a football player too at one point, and we're reaching out to him, trying to get him on here real quick. So hopefully we can make that happen real soon. So, hey, thanks so much for being on Coffee with Democrats. And until next week, everybody, please be safe. Thank you.
Thank you.